My name is Earl Willis Jr. I'm from the Morgan County Public Library. Today is February the 23rd, 2017, and we're in Bowling Green, Kentucky. And I'm with Mr. Gary Villereal. Okay, so it's good to talk to you today. We're going to start off this with a basic question, and I'll ask you, when and where were you born?
I was born in Pontiac, Michigan, March 29th, 1949.
1949, okay. What were you doing before you entered the service?
Well, right after high school, I left home at 18 with $50 in my pocket, headed out to San Francisco and Haight-Ashbury.
Okay. And what branch did you serve?
I was drafted into the Army.
Okay. So that answers our next question. You weren't enlisted, you were drafted.
Right.
Okay. Did you receive? Can you tell about when you were drafted? Can you tell maybe that experience in going to maybe basic training and some of the specialized training you had? Can you speak?
Okay. Well, it's interesting because I had received a draft notice, so I came back from California to Michigan because that's where I had all my experience, and I had some medical issues related to my foot because I was born with a club foot, and I had surgery to correct that. So I was told that I needed to take medical records to the enlistment facilities. So I got my medical records, went there, and I had told them that I had never been given a physical, so I thought I was being given a physical, and they said, no, we're in the process of taking you in now. We'll do the physical now and qualify you. So they said, if you have any medical issues, to go into this other line. So I got in this line, and when it came to my turn, there was 3 people there. There was one by the door, then there was one at the other end of the door, and an officer. So I walked over to that. I went at the other end of the room, and I handed the medical records, and the officer looked at him and said, well, he made it here okay, so he should be okay. He said, well, he has some medical issues here. And then he said, well, and he threw him in the trash can. There was a bunch of stuff in the trash can. So he said, if he can walk across the room, he's conserved. So right then and there, I was not only qualified physically, but I was drafted right into the military. So I went in, and I didn't have anything because I just thought I was going for physical.
Yeah.
So from there, we went to Fort Bragg, North Carolina, and then I did basic at Fort Bragg, North Carolina, and it was not too. I was a pretty athletic kind of person. I could do tumbling and flips, and had always excelled at chin-ups and pull-ups. So I had done pretty well. In fact, when I had really gotten about 4 weeks into basic, when I was having some real trouble with my foot, and my drill sergeant pulled me over and said, asked me why I was limping. And I told him I had a sore on the back of my right leg, and so that he made me go to sick call, which by then I was like really into wanting to keep our platoon going. And the doctor examined my foot and my leg, and I had a sore that had developed all the way to my Achilles tendon. And he said, how did you get in the military with this foot? And I said, well, and I told the story. And he said, well, if you want a medical discharge, you can. And one of the things I had become to realize was that I didn't want to leave my platoon now, because our goal was to be 100% for our drill sergeant. Sergeant Casey was this real charismatic drill sergeant. So I said, no, I'd like to finish. He said, well, okay, but I'll give you a profile on your foot. So I was given 2 days off and some bandages to keep so it would heal. And then the biggest issue was to do the PE qualification. And so if you scored 600 on all the issues, you had 6 things you had to do, then the drill sergeant would bring dinner to you as kind of a reward. And so I really wanted to do that. So I scored 602 because in the run, which was always hard for me, I was like 6 minutes and 2 seconds over. You had to be 6 minutes or less. And I was really limping pretty badly towards the end. But what was interesting, we sat down for the meal, and all those who had qualified sat at a special table and were given meals. And not expecting, but Sergeant Casey brought over my meal for me. And he said, if anybody deserves this, you do with your foot.
Your heart, you had a lot of heart.
Yeah, so I felt pretty good about that. And so when I got assigned to AIT, because I had a profile, I wasn't able to go infantry. So I went to, they asked me, because I had scored real high on my scores, what I wanted to do, and they talked about missile. So I said, well, where do they have missiles? They said, Greenland, Iceland, all over Europe and stuff like that. So I said, well, I think I'll go missiles. So when I went to Fort Sill, Oklahoma for my advanced training, I went to this building and it said mortar radar. So I walked in, I said, I'm a little confused, I'm supposed to go to missile school, but this is like the mortar building. And they said, well, you have to become a mortar person before you become a missile person. And I said, let me guess where they're shooting mortars right now. He said, yeah, straight ticket to Vietnam.
Yeah.
So I did mortar school, and I was at the top of the class, and they were taking the top 10% to go into further training and beyond the regular weeks. And because I had scored so high on my test, they pulled me aside and asked me if was I interested in going to officer training school. And I said, well, asked what that involved. And they said, well, you would basically go into officer training Canada school, sort of start all over again, and it's a commitment of 4 years. And I said, I don't know if I want to really commit to 4 years right now after I'm done with this, because I'm not sure what I plan to do. And they said, well, the other thing you could do is go to non-commissioner's officer school. And you wouldn't change any of your training, everything would be the same. So I said, that sounds good to me. So I went to NCO Academy. And it was sort of a pretty interesting experience, because what they did is they made different people's battalion commander. And since I had scored the highest of every candidate to go to NCO Academy, I became the first battalion commander, which was really kind of nice, because you could just you'd wait till everybody was assembled, and then I came out, and I would just look at my assistant and go, attention, and then attention, everybody would come to the, and then it was like really being treated pretty special and stuff like that. But then the next week, I became something different. So you always trade it off and on to learn these experiences. So I became a Specialist 5, E5, within 7 months of being in the service. And then they were assembling units to go to Vietnam, and that wasn't going to happen until May. So from January, because I went in June, became a Spec 5 in December. So from January to May, I was a trainer for anti-mortar radar. And there were 10 of us that were trainers, and we were being assembled as a unit. So when it came to May, as a unit, my unit went to Vietnam. The 10 of us went to Vietnam specifically. So there were actually 10 different groups of 10 people, and they all went to different places in Vietnam.
Yeah.
And so I went to Phu Vinh, Vietnam, and it wasn't bad duty. It was really a big base. We took some mortars, but it was like being here in Bowling Green and taking a mortar over on the West End. You know, it was like not a big deal.
You might hear it, but you don't have the.
Yeah, it was
Yeah.
like nothing closed or anything
Yeah.
like that. But the only thing that really got me was when I had to do guard duty. Since I was an E5, I was a sergeant of the guard. So I had a guard post that we faced a little village that was right next to the base. And I was out there talking to one of the guys, and it was just starting to get dusk, where you could still see pretty well, but it was starting to get difficult to see. And we noticed this, it was clearly a female, came out of a hooch, and we're looking to see what she's doing. All of a sudden she turned around with a rifle, and she shoots at us. And she missed, but it was like, we're taking fire. And then she went right back in after the one shot. And they said, well, don't shoot at the village. And so we didn't do anything. But that was the first time I got actually shot at,
Yeah.
which was pretty interesting. And so it was kind of nerve-wracking. So I spent about 2.5 months there, and then I got transferred because they had too many individuals too many radar individuals there at the base for what was happening. They needed E5s elsewhere. So I got stationed at Tan Son Nhut Air Force Base, which was excellent duty. I mean, they had regular barracks, they had showers, they had food 3 times a day, and you could, after you did your duty, you could go down to Saigon if you wanted for the day or the evening or whatever, and it was just like being stateside. And
Yeah.
Saigon was pretty safe at that time in '69 because, you know, the U.S. had just a big buildup.
Yeah.
So they wouldn't let us take weapons into Saigon, and so I bought a camera and took lots of pictures and stuff like that. And I was there for 28 days until I got transferred. And so like my first 4 months were really, really pretty good service duty, and then I went out into the field or into a combat situation, kind of more the jungle kind of atmosphere. And then that's when I began to experience more combat, mortars, sniper fire, going out in different locations, and then the most intense was being shipped to BUDAP, Special Forces camps. And there were me and my 9 guys, and we were assigned to the Special Forces at BUDAP, which was maybe a mile or 2 from the Cambodian border. And that's when things got really pretty intense. A lot of mortars. The first time we got hit, we must have taken in 10 mortars, and we called in the coordinates, and they said, well, we can't shoot there, that's in Cambodia. And I sort of said, so why am I here? And the guy just said, over and out. I mean, he didn't know why I was there. So we had a pretty intense time where we weren't getting, there wasn't any way to get supplies to us because the Special Forces guy said that their job was to break up the Ho Chi Minh Trail where all the supplies was coming to this. Yeah, right. And our job was to try to prevent the base from being overrun. So we became, I was in charge of 4 posts, because we really didn't stay in the bunkers because those were identified and the bunkers always got hit. So we stayed outside of those areas. If a bunker was over there, we'd stay over here where there was no bunker because we knew that they knew where we were at. So we always shifted where we were guarding the perimeter. And usually I had 2 of us in the 2 places. So, you know, that's 8 people and then 2 on the radar unit. So we were like working almost all the time. We were always up. we never shut down because we got mortared around the clock and got sniper fire quite a bit.
If you don't mind me asking, and you can tell us if you would rather not talk about it, but to explain what it is to be in combat or for somebody to try to take your life, because if you've never been in that situation, you really don't understand. Can you maybe explain to us like what you think or how, what's going on? Or
Well, I guess maybe the best way to describe it is there's times when you're afraid and there's times when you're not, and there's times when you don't really feel anything. And it becomes more of a matter of survival rather than anything else. For example, when one time, Charlie and I, one of my individuals I got close with, we were on guard duty because you always had two people together. And we were being what they referred to, not completely probed, but what the Viet Cong would do is they would crawl as far into the perimeter as they could, and then what they would do is throw a satchel charge, grenade, or something where they thought we were, and then they would leave. And I'm one night I'm sitting there, I'm thinking, I'm going, this is like. So I said, "Hey, Charlie," because you really couldn't talk too loud. So I whispered to him, Charlie, I said, if we get a sapper charge thrown here, I'm not going to jump on that thing. And he goes, "Good, because I don't think I'm going to jump on it either." He said, "What are we going to do?" I said, "Well, the best thing to do is remember where you're at. No matter what, you go to your left, and I'll go to my right, because the last thing we want to do is bump into each other."
yeah,
And he said, "Okay." He said, if that's what you're going to do, that's really nice. I said, "Yeah." I said, "Yeah. I mean, I like you, but I'm not going to give my life up for you." And he said, "Yeah, I understand that. But it makes me feel good because I don't know if I want to give my life up for you either."
yeah. But you had a plan.
But that's the sort of mentality you
Yeah.
take, that when you're being fired at, even though you want to protect your guys and you're upset when they get hurt or something like that, or you really, it becomes kind of individualistic, and you've got to take care of yourself. So it's a matter of whether you have the courage cloak on or not at the time. And the one guy I always sort of did protect was Marvin Varlas. He was one of what they called McNamara 100,000. Wasn't a real bright person. Wasn't retarded or anything like that, but he just could not put things together. Like, I never put him on guard duty because he was the kind of guy, if he identified someone coming to him, he would say, "Oh, hi, what are you doing?"
Yeah.
And so I couldn't trust him on guard duty. And whenever we got mortared, I always looked for where he was at, because he would just stand there to see where it would land. So I would leave, say, a safe area and tackle him to get him on the ground or something like that. So I just never thought he should have been in the military. But he was the nicest guy in the world.
Yeah.
He would just do anything for anybody, and people always ask. Somebody would ask him for money, for example, and if we were going to a little village or something, he would give it to them. So he never had any money, never had anything, and if he did get something, he always shared it and stuff like that. So he made it back okay, because I came back with him, and he was in Detroit, so he made it back okay. But I don't know if that answers the question.
Yeah, I think it does. I think you talked it out with your buddy, and you just wing it. You had a plan.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't if it was going to happen. It was when it was going to happen.
Yeah.
So yeah, and I've talked to other people through these interviews, and they said that they had confidence through their training that they would make it through, and that gave them confidence.
Yeah. I can't quite say I had confidence. It was always, to me, it was more like sort of like a crapshoot. And I think maybe because had gotten sniped so much. I had my pants ripped by a sniper fire, and bullets whiz by, it whizzes by you before you know what you can do.
Yeah.
And it was, and because there were so few of us, it was boot up was like maybe the size of a football field. There were the 10 of us, the 12 Green Beret, and I think there were between 20 and 30 South Vietnamese regular army. And that was all that was there. And the next closest base was many miles away. So it wasn't like there was a lot of people there. So when you only have so many people to shoot at, and they weren't shooting at the Vietnamese, they were shooting at either the Green Beret or us. So if there's 10 of you being shot at, you have a high percentage rate of being shot.
Then there's like a 35,000 or 100 or whatever.
Yeah, 1,000 or
Yeah.
100, yeah. So that always was made it different in the sense that it was more like a crapshoot. You either were lucky or you weren't. And a really good friend of mine who was on his second tour that was sort of like my mentor, Sergeant Montgomery. The last thing he said to me was that whether I decided to stay in the military or not, he could tell that get an education. And then shortly after that, he was killed. And he was somebody I never thought would be killed because of his experiences and all that, and it was second tour and things like that. When I did get back, I got my bachelor's degree, got my master's degree, and I got my PhD.
Yeah.
All because of Sergeant Montgomery. And he was right. My life always got better with every degree.
So what year is this?
He was killed at Boot Op on December 23rd, 1969.
Okay.
Yeah, and I was with him when it happened, and I took care of him and got him on the airplane, on the helicopter that took him back and all that. So it was too bad. He had 4 kids and was 36 years old and lived in Louisville, in fact.
Okay.
And I had visited his family and stuff like that.
Yeah. So, where specifically did you serve? What part of Vietnam?
It was in what they referred to as 3 Corps.
Okay.
What is it? The water part. The Delta area was 4 Corps, and then Saigon, Paris Peak, and Fishhook and stuff like that was 3 Corps, and Central Highlands was 2 Corps, and up by the DMZ was I Corps.
Okay.
And I was in 3 Corps, along the Cambodian border, mostly.
Would you like to talk about maybe how you talked to your mother or father back? Did you write them or contact them or your family or?
I wrote. I didn't have when I went to Vietnam. I had this premonition I wasn't going to come back, so I had sold everything. I got rid of totally everything. I had a girlfriend that we weren't real serious or anything like that, but I broke up with her and I didn't keep anything in. My parents and I were really very close. Like I said, I left home when I was 18.
Yeah.
So my mother would write, and occasionally, it's funny, she sent me she had heard somewhere that we liked Kool-Aid. So she sent me these packages of Kool-Aid because and she puts in her letter that I didn't send the sugar because I figured you could pick it up at a store someplace there because it was kind of heavy. So we had that Kool-Aid without any sugar, and it wasn't very good. So I didn't really, and they never asked me about it at all. Never once did they ask me about it. And one time I asked my mother, I said, "Weren't you ever curious about what I did in Vietnam?" And she started So I don't want to hear, don't talk to me about that. So I never bothered.
Yeah.
And my father was not a military man, so he had to, during World War II, he developed tuberculosis. So that disqualified him for the military, so he was always sort of a non-military person and stuff like that. And it wasn't something he talked about at that time. So
It wasn't common.
yeah.
So where were you when the war ended? Or how did you, when your tour was over, what year was it? Do you,
Okay, I ended April 12th, 1970, and they flew us in to Oakland, California, and I stayed out in California for a week before I came back to Michigan because I had, friends and relatives out there. So when I came back, I don't remember too much about what happened. The reason I know I stayed out in San Francisco for a week was because I found an airplane ticket that was a week later, and then I had a cousin out in California said that I had spent a week out there, but I don't remember it at all. Like I don't remember the flight from Vietnam back to the U.S.
okay, you don't remember
I don't
that?
remember any of that. I hear guys talk about when they announced you've left aerospace, South Vietnam, everybody cheered. But I have a picture of the airplane, but I don't remember anything other than they're saying you're going to have steak here at Oakland. And it was like 3 o'clock in the morning. And that's the only thing I remember. I don't remember anything at all in between. So I just have spots of lost of memory. Like I lost 30 days in Vietnam. Because I was the E5, I kept track of where we were, what we were doing. And in my notes, they said we went to, after Budap, Special Forces Camp, we went, because that was overrun by the Vietnamese, and we were able to get out okay. We had gone to Song Bay, Special Forces Camp, and we were there for 30 days. But I don't remember any of that. And I have pictures of the base that I don't recognize. So I have had these trouble with memory recall that I just can't explain. And it was pretty much that way when I got back to the U.S. There are places I just don't have a recall. Like I don't remember, like I had a job, I worked at the auto plant, and I don't remember, I just remember going to my first class in a community college because I didn't do too well in high school. And so I had to go to community college before I could go to university. But I remember going to the class, and I have bits and pieces of hanging out in Detroit, like where the toughest areas are.
Yeah.
And I used to carry a pistol with me a lot.
Yeah.
So I just have spots of memories like that.
Where did you go to school at and get your education at?
I started out at Oakland Community College, went there for 2 semesters, and then I was able to transfer to Oakland University in Rochester, Michigan. Got my bachelor's there, and graduated in 75, and then they had to encourage me to get my master's degree because I had done really well. Graduated with honors, and then I got my master's in 1977, and then I went to work as a social worker doing counseling and for a steel company doing employee assistance program counseling for them for 10 years, and then I went to University of Pittsburgh to get my PhD.
Okay.
And then I went into academia at university level professors.
Okay. And you've taught some at Western?
Right. My first started teaching at Marywood University in Scranton, Pennsylvania. Taught there for about, I think, 4 years or so. Then I was recruited to go to Arizona State University and teach at their social work program. And then I got recruited to go to develop the MSW program at the University of Texas Pan American. And then my wife and daughter didn't really like the heat like I do. And so we came to Western when they had a job opening here to help develop their master's program. So I've been teaching here I taught here since 2004 and retired in 2015.
Okay. Did you meet your wife when you were in the military or after?
After military, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I was single when I was in the military.
Yeah. How did you adjust to civilian life?
I don't really know. I was working full-time at the auto company on the assembly line, going to school full-time. So I didn't really have a lot of free time. I was sleeping about 4 hours a day because I did a lot of studying, and so the 8 hours at work and then studying for school, and so I just didn't really have much time I didn't hang around with anybody. I never went back, never been to a class reunion, seen anybody from my old high school days or anything like that. I just never felt connected to them anymore.
Yeah. Were you ever keep in contact with the people you served with, or?
Don't know where they were. I did get a hold of Charlie Tokars once, and he was in Connecticut. And when I went to visit him, my wife and I went to visit, he was like totally drunk. And his wife said that he's like just drank all the time. And in the military, there was a time if we ever got anything to drink, Charlie would drink. I mean, he would really drink a lot. So, and he didn't remember. He was pretty out of it. So that wasn't any good for me to be around him. So
yeah. Do you remember how you were? Anybody meeting you at the airport, or like you said you were close to your parents? Did you just kind of back to military civilian life? You just kind of went on with your life?
Well, it's interesting because when I flew back to Detroit, at that time you could meet at the gate. And when my parents said they would pick me up with my grandfather, who I guess was really the big motivator to meet me at the airport. When I got off the airplane, no one was there. And so I figured, well, maybe they had changed their mind. So I had started figuring out how I was going to get back from Detroit back to Pontiac, which was a good distance away. And I was walking down this, and then all of a sudden I saw my parents coming from another terminal, and what my mother had gotten the wrong airline. So they were waiting at the wrong gate. So they were there. And so anyways, the thing was they saw me, and of course she hugged me and stuff like that. And my grandfather was the one who was really, he wouldn't let me take my duffel bag, so he carried that.
When you were your army dress uniform?
No, I had changed in
civilian
we were
clothes?
told, yeah.
Because you weren't in the army anymore, right?
Right. No, well, they told us that as soon as we could get out of uniforms,
Okay.
if you didn't want conflicts.
Yeah, this is Vietnam era, and it's not kind of very.
Yeah.
Do you remember? I know at the early 70s, like 72, 73, 74, like 75, that the war in Vietnam was really winding down. Do you remember ever watching the news, or ever thinking about it, or just something you just didn't want to deal with anymore?
No, I just remember watching the fall. When we toured the fall of South Vietnam. I don't know if you've ever seen any pictures, but they have a statue in Saigon that gets toppled over.
Yeah.
I had actually been there to have a picture of me standing at that.
I was
statue.
born on April 29th, 1975, the day Saigon was.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
And so that struck me as that was really probably the only thing. And no, we were told. I was kind of like a really pulled type rubber band, and one of the things they had told us that if we had trouble with like anger or stuff like that, and I was pretty what I mean is like when I was getting ready to leave Vietnam, when my tour was over. This E6 was coming to take my place because I didn't want to take a commission. I didn't want to extend a year to be made an E6 because I was like too wired up, and I would just tell my guys to do something, they would do it. And this E6 came along and was trying to tell my guys what to do, and they weren't listening to him at all. And he said, how do you get those guys to listen to you? They won't listen to me, and I don't know what to do. What am I going to do? And I remember looking at him, and you know, at that time we always had a weapon on us. And I looked at him, I said, they know if they don't do what I tell them, that I'll shoot them. And then I looked at him, I said, no, if you don't do what I tell you to do, I'll shoot you. And I walked away. And that pretty much was my mentality. And
Yeah.
it wasn't a joke, it wasn't a fad. And my guys knew that be the fact, because I didn't tell people to do anything unless it had to be done. And they knew that I wouldn't tell them to do anything that I didn't do first. So they knew that, and so that's how it was. And so we were told that if we had those kind of issues there in Vietnam, if we didn't want to end up in prison, avoid civilians. So I avoided civilians.
Yeah. Well, that's understandable.
Yeah, anything of a conflict of any kind, because I just wouldn't. My only thought was eliminate or kill the person, not hurt them or beat them, something like that. Was always to the end.
Yeah.
So I was pretty wired.
You weren't taught in Vietnam to talk things out.
Yeah. And where I was at, they weren't taking enlisted men as prisoners. They take officers as prisoners, but they wouldn't take enlisted men as prisoners. So, and that was our rule also. We didn't take prisoners. So.
Yeah. So how did your wartime experiences affect your life? How do you think that's affected your life? And you've talked about that your mentor, when you was in Vietnam, told you to get an education, so that would be one thing.
Mm-hmm. That and usually the only people I associate with mostly are veterans. I do have some civilian people I deal with, and it got easier over the time. And I used to have no tolerance for like Vietnamese, and my wife and I, neither one was able to have kids, and so we were married, I think, 12 years before we adopted. And so finally we had an opportunity to adopt a child. We adopted a girl from Russia. Her name was Anna. And it was like a changing point in my life and my wife's life. And I had always said that if I ever had a student that was Vietnamese, I'd kick him out of my class. So I was at Marywood University, which is a Catholic university, and we had been in Russia for a month, and we were just coming back we had just come back 2 days before the semester started. So I really didn't have time to get too well prepared. I was just going to do the introduction. So I came in to the class, and sitting right in front row, clearly Vietnamese, but she was a nun. And I looked at her name, and her name was Anna.
Your daughter's name.
Just like our daughter's name, and I just went. And then I did the introduction, got through that. She comes up, she said, "You were in Vietnam, weren't you?" I said, "Why?" She said, "I could just tell the way you looked at me." And I mean, sometimes I wasn't very nice to her. I was a little bit rude and stuff, but she never gave up. And so we developed an association, and she invited, we went to, matter of fact, because of her, I don't hate Vietnamese anymore. And she always stuck with me, and we wrote back and forth, and always wrote Christmas cards and stuff. And when she was her 25th year as a nun celebration, she invited us to be there, and she wanted me to be a speaker at her ceremony. And to this day, we keep in touch after all those years.
Yeah.
And so, thanks to Sister Anna, I lost that anger for Vietnamese. It was just so much that it was is wrong in a lot of ways because, there are plenty of good people there.
Yeah.
So,
So how has your military service affected the way you think about the war and the military?
about the war in general.
War in general or the military in general?
Well, unfortunately, we need to have a military, and I don't agree with anything that restricts military intervention. Ideas that you have to be shot at first before you return fire. If you shoot somebody, you can't make sure. This is what Iraqi veterans and some Afghan veterans have told me, that if you shoot somebody, you can't shoot them a second time and make sure they're dead. And which makes no sense to me. If you shoot them once and they seem dead, you might as well just make sure they're dead. But there's those kind of rules I don't agree with.
Yeah.
I just think, if you have an enemy, that you need to make sure that they're disposed of. Because the last thing you want to do is turn your back and then have them be alive and shoot you. So those kind of restrictions I don't agree with. I think if we go in, we should go full force, or we shouldn't go in at all. That kind of thing. I think we need to have a strong military, unfortunately.
Yeah. So I just want you to let the people watching this understand that about war, because a lot of times from talking to people, that you can watch it on television, but that's not all. That's not the. It's people like yourself that I've interviewed that what war is like in reality, and some things are not pretty, and you just have to do them.
Yeah, and what it is, you can have two people witness the same activity, and they'll have a different point of view. So you can't say it's all this way for any one person, because everything is always different for who's ever perceiving it. And what happens to one person may not happen to someone else, and it's hard to make judgments unless you're right there in the situation, being able to view it and see what it's like.
Yeah, that's why I think that's we're trying to get through these interviews. It's one thing to read a book or watch on television, but to talk to people like yourself and other generations of veterans who are actually there, making a decision is something totally different than watching on television. Mm-hmm. In closing, you can say whatever you like to say. What would the people watching this interview, what would you want them to take home about your experiences, or anything you'd like to say, or just your thoughts? Anything? This is the floor will be open.
Well, I think the important thing for me is what I learned is to respect what people have to say and respect their actions, as long as it doesn't impinge on someone else. There's that saying that your right to do whatever you choose is okay, as long as it doesn't impinge on me in terms of, like, you can want to slap me, but the minute you slap me, that you've broken the boundaries. So you have the right to want to do that, but you don't have the right to actually do that. So when it comes to harming others, I think that's where it stops. You have a right to, and I've talked to one person, and she was afraid that she was going to, because she had these thoughts about robbing a bank. And I told her, I said, well, you can think about robbing a bank all you want. As long as you don't do it, you're okay. And that always stuck with her. I remember seeing her years later, and she says, I've never robbed a bank. I said, great.
Yeah.
But a lot of times people worry about what they're thinking. And as long as they don't put something negative into action, it really is, to me, is pretty harmless. It's not making their life miserable.
Yeah.
So.
Is there anything else that you'd like to the future people watching this, would you like to say, or in closing?
Well, I guess for every negative I experienced in the military, there's also a positive. And I was fortunate in the fact that I was able to achieve something that I never thought I would have been able to achieve. I never had the kind of confidence that I developed from being in the military that I brought to civilian life. I look at the rest of my family, and basically I'm the only one that really has achieved a lot. I have 4 brothers and a lot of cousins, and I have probably excelled in my achievement compared to everyone else. And I can truly attribute that to my military experience, having met Sergeant Montgomery, and knowing I could do things that people said I couldn't do.
Yeah. So but seeing, I guess I can maybe paraphrase you and correct me if I'm wrong. By you being in the military in Vietnam, it gave you the confidence that you know if you can make it there, you can make it anywhere.
Yep, that's true.
Okay. Well, I appreciate you talking to me, and it's an honor to talk to you, and I appreciate your service.
Okay, thank you.